everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for CampaignHQ's Insider Webinar, Smarter Data, Stronger Campaigns, Winning Tactics for 2026. While we wait for a few more folks to get into the participant pool, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today and let you know that Teresa will not be able to join us as we planned. As we all know, and we all work in politics, we get pulled in thousands of different directions, and that is no different today as she had to shift her schedule. So we are pleased to have Will Schanno, the NRCC Data Director, with us today in her place. So again, thank you everyone who is joining us today this afternoon, and I welcome you to CHQ's Insiders Webinar, Smarter Data, Stronger Campaigns, Winning Tactics for 2026. I'm Ken Tracy, the Chief Client Officer here at CampaignHQ, and I'll be your moderator. We're thrilled to have all of you guys with us today for this incredibly valuable conversation. Joining us today are three leaders that know exactly what it takes to win tough races. We have Nicole Schlinger, President of CampaignHQ, Will Schanno, the NRCC Data Director, and Jordan Moskowitz, the Data and Polling Director at the NRSC. We are going to dig into the smarter data and what it really looks like in practice, how to stretch limited budgets for maximum impact, and strategies that will separate winning campaigns from the rest in 2026. With that, let's jump in. Nicole, why don't you have us start us off by introducing yourself?
Great. Thanks so much, Ken, and thanks, Will and Jordan, for being here with us. I'm excited for our panel. We've got a lot of good questions that have been submitted by the audience. I'm Nicole Schlinger. I'm the president and founder of CampaignHQ, and we help campaigns win tough races by finding the voters that are being missed and falling through the cracks and making sure that we reach them to ID, persuade, and turn out. We worked on several thousand races across the country in 2024, and we've seen a whole host of strategies that work and some that don't work. So I'm excited to share all of those and also talk a little bit about how our data strategy is going to shift with the changing landscape on how we communicate by text and phone with the updates that are happening in that space.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. Will, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Will Schanno. I'm the data director here at the NRCC for the 2026 cycle. I'm actually a pretty long-time veteran of the NRCC. I started here in the summer of 2018 as a regional data analyst. I've worked at various roles at the NRCC, including the IE data director in 2022, the regional data director for the East Coast in 2024. Before my time at the NRCC, I worked on Larry Hogan's first gubernatorial run in 2014 and in his administration. I also did some work on his Senate race back in 2024. I'm native of the Eastern Shore of Maryland and attended Towson University in Baltimore.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. Jordan, why don't you introduce yourself? I think you're muted, Jordan.
We still can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
We can now. We can now.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I'll start over. Excited, everybody, to be here today. Thanks for joining. My name is Jordan Moskowitz, the Polling and Data Director here at the NRSC. It's my first cycle here at the NRSC, so excited for the races ahead. Originally started out at the RNC, working in the political department there as a political coordinator. Then worked my way over to Wisconsin. I was there for 4 years, did a lot of help on state party stuff, working with campaigns, a lot of statewide races, and even some local school board, county exec, town board races, which were really fun. And then came back to DC working over at the Data Trust there last cycle, and now excited to join the wonderful NRSC. Excited to get into a lot of data questions here and go over some good stuff today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Will. If you do have a question for the panelists today, please put that in the Q&A chat. You can find that at the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and click there and enter your question, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. And then thank you to everyone who pre-submitted a good number of questions for us to kick off our conversation here. So, Jordan, we'll start with you. Modeling audiences are everywhere, but how much can campaigns really trust them, and how should they vet them and their effectiveness versus sticking with traditional universes?
Yeah, of course. A lot of modeling has expanded over really the last couple cycles. A lot of campaigns are utilizing this to great effect. Models are really powerful tools. to help, craft different audiences, different voters, find out which messages are moving different sets of people and how, you want to effectively target them. But at the same time, you still need to measure them, validate them within its own data and against traditional audiences. I will say that state-specific models are definitely going to be better than, kind of your more generic national models, but sometimes smaller campaigns can't always utilize specific models. But they're extremely powerful tools that are really helpful for audience segmentation, finding the right messages to the right voters, how to target them, should really be utilized by any kind of modern day campaign.
Awesome. Anything else to add, Will?
Sort of building off of that, something I believe very strongly in is it's incumbent upon the political data team to really take a lead on education and learning how to read a model and become the best subject expert that they can to help build a culture of trust with their campaigns up and down the ballot. So when a campaign comes to the data team, they can say, hey, what does this model mean? It's very important that the political data team actually takes time to understand what a model is and digging into it more. This cycle, something my team's been doing is working with several modeling firms to become better educated and more well-rounded with modeling as a concept and in action.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we often see is, there's campaigns at a level that can do their own modeling, and then there's campaigns for whom being able to access some off-the-shelf models is something new and really interesting to them. I think about, campaigns, state and local campaigns now being able to access models on things like, whether it's Second Amendment or school choice, the kind of things that, maybe in a down ballot race are going to cut across some demographics and across some party lines so that people in a close race might be able to reach out to audiences that, if you just used your standard party registration, geography, age, etc., reaching into some pockets of voters that you might not ordinarily target. The thing that I caution people about is as you go further down the ballot, there's more variability in turnout and there's more variability in people's base knowledge of the candidates and awareness of them. So while modeling could be a great tool and a new, more sophisticated tool than state and local campaigns have had access to before, the reality is you have to understand that a model is a great guess. It is not knowing with certainty. And so if you take a modeled audience and you go knock on their doors and you find out that the following household, the following people at the following households support you and the following don't, it's really incumbent upon that campaign to make sure that that data gets transmitted and used in all of the future targeting and messaging.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that all of you guys brought up. And I think, when we're thinking about the modeling and the demographic data and how we turn that into actual insights, the one thing that comes to mind is, we only have so many resources. And so a lot of campaigns, especially on tight budgets, are now turning more towards AI models, predictive analytics that are growing fast. How can campaigns balance that accuracy, the transparency, and the integration across all the different inputs from the grassroots data that's coming back to them? Feel free to jump in, Will.
So something we've been using AI with is basically taking some of the results that we've gotten from the past couple cycles and loading in and trying to narrow down certain areas. We have a lot of congressional seats in Texas and California that are predominantly Hispanic, and there aren't necessarily communities that we've had a lot of contact with prior to the past couple of years. So using that to try and see some of these new trends and narrowing down who those folks are, and then trying to identify those trends. Where is there a certain precinct or a certain area or a certain subgroup within that is shifting towards us a little bit harder than we realized? And then using that same knowledge to say, hey, help us find where more of these areas might be in the country or within the district, and going after those people. We've done a lot of work on the Rio Grande Valley. We've done a lot of work in the Central Valley, especially in California 13, California 22. And that has been a big focus of ours predominantly this cycle. Another more fun one we've been able to use is just working with some of our different vendors that are starting to use AI within voter contact. There are now several door knocking firms, and this is field, not necessarily data, but they're learning to streamline the actual creation of walkbooks. So when you're actually sending people out, you can have a pre-made walkbook instead of trying to cut around a neighborhood you might not know. You can actually have an efficiently drawn walkbook that we have now. So that's just what one of our vendors is doing. It's been really interesting to watch so far. And it's taking something from kind of a spatial view and how to narrow something down in a much cleaner fashion.
Yeah, Will makes a great point about being able to take existing data and utilize that with AI insights, predictive analytics modeling, to go and find other voters who are going to be moved within the same message, right? You have your base voter file, and then you overlay all these different demographic data sets and analytics on top of that, and that's going to help you kind of find the right messages, the right voters to go after with the segmentation. I'll say too, we had this last cycle, a lot of new registrants. There are going to be more new registrants this cycle. A lot of them don't have as much data behind them, especially voting data, but also demographic data. They could be, just turned 18 and new to all the files across the ecosystem, and utilizing, household demographic data, plugging into these AI predictive analytics to help model who these people are, what they look like, and maybe what messages resonate with them is really crucial.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been seeing is looking at using AI to change messaging based on who you're talking to. That there may be a dozen different reasons or more to support a particular candidate, but tailoring the right reason to the right candidate could be the difference between having a persuasive conversation that turns out a voter versus versus having someone hang up the phone on you. So that's an area where we've been focusing as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. We did just get a question in, and there will be a copy of this webinar shared with everyone afterwards. And if you guys do have any other questions, please put them in the Q&A chat now as we continue our conversation. I think it was really interesting what you were talking about, Jordan, about there's going to be a lot of new registered voters in this next upcoming cycle, right? Clearly, that's going to be something that's going to be different in the 2026 cycle versus the 2022, and how Republicans, have the majority now, and what implications that means for us with also having the White House. Are there any voter groups or turnout indicators that you're watching more closely now because of that, Jordan?
Oh, we can't hear you again. Yikes.
Still nothing, or
Now good. Now good.
Sorry, I moved my keyboard out of the way. Yeah, one of the key groups that we really saw move towards Republicans this past cycle was younger voters. Like I just talked about, they're going to be more likely to be new registrants. And with the young voters, we really saw a generational shift. Kind of different data sources have it out there, but anywhere from 6 to 8 points move towards GOP in this past election. A lot of that movement led by young men and young men of color. So these are really prime audiences and groups that have moved to our way. Our messages are resonating with these audiences, and is going to be crucial, not just for this cycle, but cycles beyond the 2026 cycle, to really grow our coalition and base there in terms of the actual new registrants. I think another key group obviously is going to be some of these irregular, lower propensity voters. That was a really key group that came out for President Trump and other Republicans in the 24 cycle. I know in a lot of our target states in the Senate, anywhere from 25% to 35% of the voters who turned out in 24 didn't vote in the midterms in 2022. Now, 40% are new registrants, 60% are really just presidential only voters. So these are really kind of two kind of key coalitions that, we're focused on, we're looking at, continually monitoring, and really deserve some extra outreach to ensure that they turn out in this midterm and obviously beyond this cycle as well.
Yeah, and sort of piggybacking off of that, Jordan, really just watching, one thing I've been particularly interested in has been some of these college campuses. You saw, a drop off in these college campuses in 2020. A lot of these kids were back home. And then you have a new crop who in 2024, there's a lot of turnover. And you still just saw a really big shift specifically around these college towns. My favorite one I noticed was College Station down in Texas, where Donald Trump flipped, I think, 2 of the precincts there, which was predominantly student housing, which is kind of interesting to think about as a Republican flipping college housing precincts. That's something I've been watching quite a bit, as well as some of the more diverse parts of cities that, normally were just solid cerulean blue. And you're starting to see some of the shift happen in some of these bigger cities. A big one for me watching, again, Texas is Houston, and seeing how some of these precincts in Houston, which voted for Obama by, 80-20, are now close to 55-45. And watching that has been something that I've had a lot of interest in this cycle.
That's really interesting. Something that I guess a couple of points that I'd mention. Earlier this week, I was at an event where a Republican pollster and a Democrat pollster talked about what they saw in 24 and what they see coming up in 26. The Democrat pollster was particularly interesting in that they said they were certainly interested in Trump low prop voters, like we've been talking about. They also were particularly interested in watching what they were calling Biden skippers, people who voted in 2020 and then did not vote in 2024 and are Democrats. Are those people going to come back to the Democrat Party? And if they do, and Trump low prop voters don't turn out in a midterm, that would be detrimental to us, certainly. But I think looking at those Biden skippers and their potential movement could be just as important. To your point, though, Will, I think about many of our traditional outreach tactics, and if we are going to go after young people in student housing, and we're going to go to more urban communities, some of the things like door knocking might be tougher. We oftentimes wind up making live calls at the last minute to people whose doors couldn't be reached. And I wonder if we could be incorporating and thinking about that a little bit earlier. If we're targeting younger voters, we know 25% of them are going to opt out of their texts. So, can we get a voicemail on their phones that's going to pop up and give them a notification so they see and experience the same thing? We worked for a state legislative caucus in a red state last year, and they were trying to get a supermajority, whereas they just had a regular majority. And so we were playing in a place that Trump was clearly popular and was going to win. They had a Republican candidate for governor that was doing well. And so, they were playing in districts where I think under a different set of circumstances, they might not have invested and spent their money. These are D plus 8 to 10. And we were doing ID calls where we would just blind ID to center left audiences and saying, are you planning to vote for Harris or Trump in the presidential election? And then we'd say, knowing that Republicans in the state house are going to be voting on these public safety issues and these school choice issues, how likely would you be to split your ticket and vote for a Republican for state house? 40% of the Harris voters said they would vote for a Republican for state house based on those issues. So to me, that brings up the question of, how do we, if Biden splitters do come back and we're working in close races, how do we get people to ticket split and pick as many of our candidates as we possibly can get them to pick? Because our issue set, candidates aside, our issue set is popular.
So that's something we've been working on quite a bit. The One Big Beautiful Bill has a lot of provisions that are quite popular.
Yeah.
And it's voting and messaging directly on segments of the bill and then working on results. And that really comes into going back to modeling, building a model based off some of those specific issues. The no taxes on tip is extremely popular across America. We have groups, some modeling I've seen out in Nevada has been, overwhelmingly Democratic based groups that love that issue. And it's like 70-30. We're probably not going to get 70%.
Yeah.
But that is something we can talk to these people about. And I think that was something that Donald Trump did very successfully last cycle, which was he was able to create fight for an issue that reached groups that Republicans normally didn't reach.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really comes down to issues and results with that.
Yeah, well, and a lot of key groups that we just talked about are really motivated by these economic issues, this working families tax cut, key provisions in there. So, it really benefits Republicans to, continue to talk about these issues, but specifically with these coalitions we just talked about, these younger voters, people more in these diverse urban areas, diverse suburbs, these economic issues are really motivators for them, and going to continue to message that out to them.
Which I think also brings up an interesting point, both with Will talking about, the influx of, younger voters, obviously on college campuses, they're not sitting, they're not living in their dorms year round, right? They're not, and if they're living there during the school year, but not outside of school. And so, to Nicole's point of, 25% of a list, you're going to get, end up being opt-outs on the text messaging side. But, when you think about phones and digital for down ballot races, those are some of the cheapest and most effective tools to still use. So I guess, are voters starting to turn out emails and text messaging, or are they still driving results, or are there other effective tools that, the folks that are listening to us today should have on their radar?
Yeah, well, I think everybody kind of understands that the electorate is more saturated than text and emails than ever before. But texts do still drive results, especially when they're targeted, timely, and actionable. You should always be personalizing your text. Having high resolution images helps with engagement. Kind of your generic text blast, a lot of them kind of get ignored, but they're still helpful, especially with things like event pushes, key information on ballot, pushing people to request their ballot, return their ballot, voting locations, all that stuff is, kind of more helpful for text blast, but still you want to be as personable as you can. And, a lot of these modernized, smarter campaigns are layering these texts into, broader strategy, pairing it with mail, pairing it with digital, door knocking. So it feels more like a conversation. I know previously one of the big key things we did was, before you actually went and knocked a neighborhood, you texted that neighborhood saying, hey, this is the, so-and-so campaign. We're going to be by your, neighborhood talking to voters. And then you do the same thing afterwards. So you could kind of continue that conversation with these voters. Another thing that has worked extremely well, I think Democrats do a good job of this. Republicans are doing a better job. A lot of great partners out there with relational organizing, utilizing your internal group of friends, family, coworkers to really push those messages out rather than, the campaign do it per se. So yeah, I still think it's really effective, but definitely more saturated than ever.
Also kind of going off what you said, Jordan, I look at texting as more of a tool in the toolbox. You need more than a hammer to build a shed. And when you're taking a look at a campaign, one text is just a text. It might be ignored, or maybe someone reads it and they forget about it. But a text with a second text and a door knock and a digital ad and maybe a mailer, just collectively, you have to tap a voter multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And the text could be one of those taps, but there do have to be more taps with that. I'm personally a very big fan of, peer-to-peer interaction with voters, whether it is knocking on their door or sending like a direct text to them, not just a mass text, but just being able to have that kind of conversation one-on-one with someone. Something I'm really proud of this past couple of cycles at the NRCC is we've had a very expansive field program working across all of our different congressional seats, targeted and defense. And working with these guys, that's also part of the toolbox. And I think it's just the combination of that where, texting digital looks great because of how cheap it is, or how easy it is to access, but it's just one tool.
Yeah, and one of the things that we often find is that texting's a visual medium. Digital is also visual, and so you share those you share those with donors, or you share them with a candidate, and there's kind of that that visual dopamine hit, and some of the organizing that we do, relational organizing, going to the door, being on the phone. We can show those numbers, but showing numbers on a spreadsheet doesn't necessarily hit them quite the same way. And so I think that's some of our job, is to tell that story. One of the things that we've found in particular is that, as AI generated videos and things are, as people have more and more mistrust of what they see, they yearn for authenticity, and and so things that are perceived as, that's why a door knock is so effective and long lasting. One of the things that we've seen a surprising kind of a outsized success within the last 12 months is telephone town halls. We've been doing some of them for Senator Lindsey Graham, and he'll call out to 100,000 people and get 12,000 people on the phone to listen to him for 10, 12 minutes at a time. And when we think about, that's clearly that's more than a candidate's going to be able to talk to in a given night. That's longer than an average voter's going to get to listen to them, on a Fox News segment, or on a video that we can text to them. And so just being able to see them have those, have a longer, more authentic conversation and answer people's question at scale has been really exciting. But again, it's that challenge of, at the end of that event, the candidate who was on the line gets a report, and they feel like they were just talking into their phone. They didn't see those people in front of them. So I think it's on us to paint that picture, and and to do things that lend themselves to having an authentic conversation that backs up the authenticity of all of the print and the digital that we're putting out there. And we've surprisingly seen that work for down ballot candidates too. If you'd asked me 4 years ago, I'm not sure I would have recommended that, but we're seeing state house candidates talk to 400 or 500 people at a time, and if they can do it, why not?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the point, right? It's the reason why Trump has such a connection with the people is because he's authentic, right? And when we see the cheap imitation that Gavin Newsom is trying to do of copying that authenticity of Trump, it just doesn't play well, right? And so, I think that, to Nicole's point, and really to also, Jordan Will's point of, making it actionable, making it, where you can have that authentic communication with voters in multiple different taps is going to be absolutely critical. I think that's what led to a really big success that we saw, obviously, in 2024. And so, on the flip side of this, where do you guys see smaller campaigns waste money because they're trying to copy either statewide or federal data strategies?
One moment. Here we are. So I think with smaller campaigns, you don't necessarily have to invest every single dollar you have into a data infrastructure. If you're talking to state legislature race, county commissioner, mayor, something smaller like that, you don't necessarily need to have a full-blown giant modeling project. There are some exceptions to that, like if you're running for a state senate race in California, which has more population than a congressional seat. But as a side hobby of mine, and this is kind of funny, I'm helping a friend of mine run for House of Delegates in Maryland. It's a pretty Republican seat, and the total expected electorate right now is about 5,000 people. So working with her and talking to her about it, it's really just going through with your local voter file so you can figure out who turned out the last couple of primaries, working with just basic registration data, and being able to use Excel and just going through and say, hey, we found these people. They voted in the last 2 primaries as Republicans. Let's start with that. And it's a smaller group, and she's raising quite a bit of money, or pretty good money for it, but we want to make sure the money's still going to be used well. And we really want to hit the same core group of 5,000 people over and over. With that as well, we're going to be able to do some voter contact with it and have results that come back from the voter contact. So we can then take the data that we got and, we can stop talking to people who said, hey, we love you, we're going to vote for you, can I have a sign? And we can target some other people and then come back to that same group and remind them a few months down the line, hey, go vote. I do think, however, the cost of data grows as the office grows. So when you do have a more local race, but it's a bigger population, like a very large county council seat, I'm talking like a major metro urban area council seats, or like the California state Senate seats, that does grow in size. But a lot of the time you can kind of get away with not necessarily spending a lot on data and just having someone who really understands the system in place.
That's great insight.
We can't hear you again, Jordan.
Yeah, sorry. Can coming
now.
through now?
Yes.
Yep.
Love technology. Yeah, we'll have great points there. I think a lot of the kind of waste comes from kind of chasing scale rather than going after precision. Like Will highlighted, for a lot of these smaller races, a really kind of core, well-built voter universe with targeted mail, door knocks, and texting is really kind of going to put you over the edge. I'd also say some other big points are, make sure you're in contact with a lot of these larger statewide campaigns, congressional campaigns. Make sure that they're carrying your lit, right? If they have specific door knockers, make sure they're having your lit so you get messages out in front of the right people. Talk to them about what universes they're covering. A lot of the time, the national Republican groups, the statewide campaigns, do a lot of great job in targeting, your basic target universes, your get out the vote universes, swing audiences. So that really allows you to kind of free up some time to go talk to some of these more niche, kind of diverse audiences that maybe your campaign specifically resonates more with, which will in turn obviously help, kind of raise the rising tide lifts all ships with the top of the ticket races. And then finally, I'll say, you hear a lot of stuff with, data and modeling and universes. Don't feel like you need to go out and purchase all this data. Talk to your state party, talk to your committees. They provide a lot of this data for free in most instances. So don't feel like you need to go out and buy something per se. A lot of that stuff is already available to you free of charge, from your state party. So, don't chase scale, go after precision with some key target universes.
I love that. That's so well put. I would say the number one thing I see people waste money on is what I would call the basic blocking and tackling of politics. If you, if you called Agnes and Agnes is no longer with us, make sure that she's not getting any more mail. Or if, if you're halfway through your early voting period and you have and it is possible for you to get the list of people who've already voted and you have not removed them, campaigns can waste, if 50% of people are going to vote in the early voting period and you have not removed them as they vote, you potentially are wasting 50% of your budget. So making sure that you can accomplish that basic blocking and tackling can save you an enormous amount. I would rather call or text or mail the right 2,500 voters 4 times than the wrong 10,000 voters once.
Yeah, that's a great point. And our Q&A session is actually open right now. So again, if you have any questions, put it in our Q&A. We do have a question that ties really well into what we were just talking about here. So I'm going to jump to this one. Mailers versus digital in a more local campaign, question mark, what is more effective? Also, any tips for most cost-effective voter outreach tactics that, cash-strapped campaigns can utilize?
So again, going back, my local race. So the cheapest one is always just door-to-door contact. You got to pay for the lit. You do that once, hopefully once, maybe twice. And then if it's especially like a smaller race, having the candidate going door-to-door themselves has always been something I've had a lot of success with. I think there's a super strong personal touch with that. And I think a lot of people, more so than just a regular staffer or volunteer going door knocking, has a special kind of impact with that. Something we're planning is, we're basically trying to figure out the rollout of when we have my friend, she's going to start knocking doors. We did a mailer first. We want to do a text afterwards, and then we're going to go and do doors. So I think the most cost-effective way is having a candidate going to good doors. I think having the text go out and having the mailer, but the most cost-effective way is just pure doors. But I would really recommend just using them in unison or using them in a staggered way that they line up with what your goal is. And I use it, we're using this basically as a rollout for her candidacy. So when she can go, she can start, she kind of opened the door a little bit to people knowing who she is. And then when she knocks on their door, they're going to recognize her. So creating just a person to the image that they're receiving on their phone or in their mailbox.
Just like statewide races, the target audiences are just going to be so crucial for these smaller local races, right? It helps you save a lot of money. Some of these local races, it's nonpartisan, right? So you don't want to, if they're conservative leaning Republican, but it's nonpartisan, you don't really want to waste too much time going after the Democrats. They're going to have their own candidates. You really want to just kind of target your key people that vote in these local elections. Like Will's points, door knocking's free. It's the best way to get out there. As I said in my last point, if congressionals, state senate, statewide races are going out, make sure you're giving them their lit to hand that out with folks. That's going to be really key. But again, texting super cheap, effective way to kind of get your name out there. Digital's great, mail's great. Again, I think biggest key with all of this is make sure it's targeted and you're hitting a good frequency of this target universe rather than trying to hit the whole ocean. Kind of just really narrow down on your target voters and stick to them.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess piggybacking off of Jordan's point, if you are one of the challenges, particularly when we're looking at when you're looking at a campaign that has to be cost conscious, is that you can't target everyone, and so utilizing whatever the county party is going to be doing, or any of the targeted races that or the organizations, Americans for Prosperity, Susan B. Anthony list, the great organizations that we know are going to launch big door programs in the important states. So that being said, what does that leave you with? That leaves you with oftentimes with low prop voters. And so if you think about for a down ballot cost conscious race, one of the threats they face that top of the ticket races don't face is undervoting. So the top of the ticket is turning out for the top of the ticket, but when you turn people out who are not regular, frequent, habitual voters, they will sometimes vote the top of the ticket and leave the rest of it blank. And so, so making sure you get out to those people. And I think that, that can take a number of forms. One of the advantages that down ballot races have, like the one that Will's friend is running, is they often have volunteers who will enthusiastically work for them that are not the regular political volunteers, the ones who have always done it and only are going to do what they're going to do. The most passionate volunteers I've ever seen are on campaigns where they know the candidate, and so leveraging that, we talk about relational organizing, and so often it just goes immediately to what app can I buy, when the best relational organizing is having your friends have coffees in their home and call and text people on their own phones. And so really making the most out of your volunteers, and then using paid voter contact to be what plugs the holes and supplements that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. An old adage I heard is, for a local race, a great volunteer is worth about $10,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. One other thing I was just thinking of too, when we talk about this targeting, and Nicole, raised a good point about undervoting, but at the same time, good segmentation of propensity voters is going to be good, right? Like if a voter votes in every single one of these local elections and they're, Republican conservative voter, maybe they only get one text, one piece of mail, whereas somebody who's, maybe a very frequent voter in the November elections, but doesn't turn out as much in these, April local elections, they might get more pieces. You still want to touch that high propensity universe, but maybe they don't need as much mail pieces as a mid-lower propensity universe. You still want to get in front of them, but you don't need to target them as much. They're going to vote. You just need to get your name in front of them.
I think that's a really good point on all fronts there. And the one thing that has come up a couple times, which is, Jordan, you specifically said the relational organization, organizing. Wow, if I could just say that, was something that the Democrats did really well, and we're starting to do well. Do you guys see anything else that the Democrats are using, data for differently than Republicans? And are there lessons that we should steal or traps that we should avoid based on what they're doing?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, the relational organizing, I think, really kind of sprung about from Democrats like 2-3 cycles ago, and they're really kind of incorporating it. You see a lot of Republican campaigns starting to utilize that more. A lot of the vendors out there are building tools to help campaigns do relational organizing, which is great, and they're taking advantage of it. I think some key differences between Republicans and data, or Republicans and Democrats on the data side is, Republicans, a lot of their voters, or Democrats, a lot of their Democrat voters are more concentrated, right? Whether it be in these, suburban areas or, key coalitions that are more concentrated, they could get away with just kind of hitting a whole DMA or a whole, city center, whereas Republicans, we need to be a lot more precise and targeted in our outreach, which really comes back to, your data segmenting and audience creation and using, modeling to figure out which messages move the right people, because Democrats could get away with, giving one message to the entire a specific area, whereas, Republicans need to target our voters differently, right? Like a rural 18 to 35-year-olds is going to be a lot different than an 18 to 35-year-old in a urban area or a suburban area, and same thing with a lot of these different key demographics. So just the ability for Republicans to segment our audiences and to know which messages are resonating with them the most, and then deploy that out is such a key difference, and things that Republicans really need to take advantage of.
Yes, especially going with segmenting, because it is a little bit harder for us because our voters are more spread out. And the one thing that changed a lot in 24 is we started to pick up more voters in these concentrated areas. There's an article I read a couple weeks back that talked about Democratic voter registration efforts and how they have to retool them, because some of these guys, some of the Dems started to realize that they were registering Trump voters. You had these people who had never voted before, were registered, and then turned around and voted for Donald Trump, and the Democrats were the ones who did it. And I think that's something that's very interesting going forward with us is, we have these new voters, and this is another point I have later on, but these new voters are going to be some of the biggest focus going forward, because we don't know much about them and we need to learn about them, because these are going to be folks who help push us over the edge. And I really want to make a point this cycle of not doing what the Democrats did last cycle and registering and pushing out Democratic voters.
Absolutely. Wow, that I had not heard that.
Yeah, it was a fascinating article.
Yeah. One of the one of the challenges, I think that I think relational organizing is a long time coming, and I'm glad that more people are picking up on something that seems so instinctively make sense, right? When I'm looking for a plumber, a Yelp review is okay, but a review from a friend, that makes the difference. That being said, one of the things that I worry about just like there's a, there's a danger of over-reliance on texting. People miss opt-outs, they miss landlines, etc. There's a threat with relational organizing that people might see it as a cure-all to our voter contact program. One of the things that's a challenge is to do relational organizing well, you have to recruit volunteers. And since COVID, we don't have as many, we can always use more volunteers. What my concern is that our volunteers tend to be the friends of our volunteers. And so as we're doing relational organizing, we may very well be organizing the people who are already going to be voting, and how, that people tend to know and associate with people who have voting habits similar to themselves. So how do you get someone to relationally organize in a diverse community that is, still majority Democrat? How do you get relational organizing done in, how do you reach the voters that you need to reach if the nodes that you have are not going to connect to them? So I think there's going to have to be a really careful watch on, are we letting voters fall through the cracks, and are we supplementing and filling those gaps with our traditional voter contact?
Yeah, thank you guys. I think that was very insightful. I think, as we get close to the end here, I want to make sure we get to a couple more of the submitted questions here that folks did. And so thank you guys again for that. Looks like we do have one more that came in in our Q&A section. So if you have any of those last questions, go ahead and jump in there. But are there any tips for succeeding in a blue state? Seems like a pretty loaded question, but maybe someone's got a silver bullet they can share.
I love this one. And what it is succeeding in a blue state is really highlighting some of the problems that exist. I live in Maryland. I've lived in Maryland my whole life. And in 2014, people got so tired of Martin O'Malley, then it was very clear that he wanted to run for president, and he was trying to do a liberal wish list on his way to the White House. And at one point, there was a store that made a t-shirt it was called O'Malley, O-W-E Malley, taxing and relaxing. And it was I actually still have the shirt still. And it's highlighting that and hoping to find a way to make it culturally relevant so that people realize, like, hey, this is actually a big problem and we're kind of tired of it. Another great example is if you go up to New York City, the borough of Queens, Flushing. It's a very Asian neighborhood, very Chinese and Korean. And public safety is a very big concern there. It's a big crossroads of a couple different rail lines. It's very densely populated. And just seeing people there who, this is an area that shifted from Obama winning it by 50, 60 points to Trump winning it by about 5 or 6. And this is, New York was not a swing state. It wasn't, it got no real national targeting, but it was the message of these problems shouldn't have to exist. And I thought that hit very well up there, and it was just fascinating walking around. I went up there earlier this year, and I saw, Republican signs in Mandarin, which is just fast. I thought it was amazing. My wife was kind of annoyed with me how excited I was, but it was just really cool to see that and see a natural shift. And, really goes with the blue states, like picking up on that natural shift and recognizing that and really having your ear to the ground to figure out what is this big problem people are complaining about and figuring out a way to present a solution to it.
I'll just add there, and to jump off Will's point, you really need to have kind of the ammo and the research and the metrics behind why people are disenfranchised. I mean, we're seeing favorability with the Democratic Party at all-time lows, right? Their policies aren't working. A lot of, kids in school are failing. They can't do math, or they can't read, right? So coming with those metrics and being able to share that out with targeted audiences is going to be really critical, and is why you saw so much movement over this past cycle and over the last few years of these traditionally Democratic areas just slowly moving to the right more and more. So just one thing I'll add there.
Yeah, that presentation I saw by the Democrat pollster where there's both the Democrat and Republican presenting, she explained in part, their defeat in 24 by saying you can't beat something with nothing. That was a Democrat pollster who said that. And so to Jordan and Will's point, we have something, right? We have issues that are popular with different segments of the electorate. No tax on tips, public safety, school choice. I go back to that ticket splitters project that we worked on. Even if you are working on a race where the incumbent at the top of an incumbent Democrat in a blue state who may look like they're not going to be beat, there are lots of ticket splitters hovering right under the surface that are absolutely gettable for us and allow us to win some of those bellwether races now that precede that precede a bigger takeover later.
Absolutely. We do have time for one more question here. So before we get to closing remarks, but how can campaigns use live data, right? Live returns either in the moment or within 24 hours from the results that they're seeing from their grassroots efforts, and how can they use those to adjust their strategy on the fly without overreaching or overcorrecting?
Yeah, I mean, tracking, returns and voter contact is very, very valuable. I will say there is some danger in chasing the noise, and you need some time to kind of collect enough sample as to not overreact from 1 or 2 days of data. I would say it's also really important to make sure you have internal benchmarks and thresholds ahead of time, whether it be, historical trends or what your model is saying, what the split should be between different audiences, right? Like if our model's predicting, the GOP turnout audience to be a 40% turnout, and in your voter contacts, it's only showing 20% of that audience is, likely to vote. Well, you might need to do some, bolstering within that audience. I'll also say, especially in terms of like tracking absentee returns, which is very valuable, it's important to put things into context, right? Like if 30 days out from the campaign, it's showing Republicans down 30 points, it might not be quite time to panic yet. Like, it's important to know, well, who are these voters? Are they Democrats that are already going to vote? Like, are they high propensity Democrats who vote every time? How does this compare to previous cycles? Like, are we in line with how ballots have been tracking previously? So it's very valuable, but you need to put these benchmarks, thresholds, historical context all into one to monitor it.
Jordan, you brought me back some stressful memories of last year. Tracking results coming in is incredibly important. You can actually see in real time as people start to vote. And once it always seems like the first initial drop of ballots is always 1 million Democratic ballots. Every cycle, it just seems to be like that. Although I will say last cycle, watching it come in, we started to see it get more and more Republican as time went by. And it was being able to watch that live was almost breathtaking because it was the first time in my career I'd ever seen it. And we had some districts that we were working on that 10 days out from the election, we had a 3 or 4% advantage on returns, which was just, I was a little bit in shock, to be completely honest. And we were able to take that when we were doing our GeoTV messaging and reaching out, we were actually able to send out more and more messages because it was going to smaller groups and going through that and cleaning our lists every single day, which can be a little strenuous. And, for a congressional race, that makes sense. And statewide, that also makes sense. Smaller, it might be a little much, but being able to actually go through and be like, hey, this is less people we have to talk to, so we can hit the same people twice. Mm-hmm. And just being able to constantly do that as time went by. And, that saved us a lot of money in some cases. And then it also helped us when going through our expectations, saying, hey, election night, we have 3 or 4 point advantage on absentee and early votes. We might not necessarily have to do as well on election day as we thought. And it makes you feel a little bit more comfortable going in. I'm never comfortable on election night, but I do believe that's really important. Just kind of going in, just be like, hey, where's your headspace at? Because you feel like you're in a better spot than you realize.
Yeah, so critical, Will. The amount of money that you could save and just not targeting people who already voted is just, you don't think about it in the in the here and now, but it really does save you a lot of money, allows you to, like Will said, target different audiences, spend more money targeting or allocating to a different group that you didn't have before. So if there's one thing, definitely be scrubbing people who already voted. Very critical.
Yeah, absolutely. That was that was exactly where I was going to go with that. I think, my mind goes specifically to Texas, where more than half the people are going to vote early in person in that 2-week period that they have, and so if you're talking to if 50% of the people you're talking to in that last final stretch have already voted, there's the dollars, but there's also the hours left. How many doors can you hit? How many phone calls can you make? How many texts can you send? If 50% of them are useless, what a waste. The other thing you can see is you know who you were expecting that you didn't get, but you can also see where you overperformed, and perhaps even once you've whittled that universe down, change some of your targets once you've filtered some of that signal from that noise. That being said, the other thing to make sure you're scrubbing out of your universe in that kind of basic blocking and tackling is people who've died, people who've moved, and people who don't support you. If someone said at the door, "I'm not going to vote for you," that plays exactly to Will's point of, they had Democrats that were out there registering Donald Trump voters. We don't need to be turning out our opponents.
Well, fantastic, guys. Thank you so much. We're at the end of our time together. So thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Jordan, for sharing such great insights today. And thanks to everyone who joined us and asked such great questions, both pre-submitting them and then throughout our conversation here today. If there's one takeaway, it's this, right? Campaigns that are going to win in 2026 will be the ones that pair smarter data with stronger strategy. So we'll be sending a follow-up email and a reply link and additional resources after this to all of those everyone who joined us here. If you'd like to connect with our team at CampaignHQ about how these tactics can work in your race, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly or anyone on our team. We'll be glad to continue the conversation. On behalf of everyone at CampaignHQ, on behalf of Nicole, Will, and Jordan, I want to thank everyone again for their time. We look forward to seeing you on the next CHQ Insiders. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye.